Everyday Orthodox. I'm Helena Bjeletich, and we get together on Sunday nights to meet everyday Orthodox Christians. We get to know the members of the body of Christ, build community through conversation, because Orthodoxy can sometimes feel fragmented through different jurisdictions, languages, and calendars. True unity with our beloved brothers and sisters in Christ. Orthodox people are interesting. So many have immigrated from faraway lands, grown up in immigrant families, converted, found the church through different paths. Every one of us is living out the faith in our own little corner of the world. We are live on ancientfaith.com, the AFR app, the AFM Facebook Live, and on YouTube. And today, we have a very special guest who you might be familiar with. Sitting next to me today, live in person in Austin, Texas, is Elissa Bjeletich Davis. Hello, Elissa. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the program, Helena.
Anytime.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
That was very well done. That's awesome. Well, we're here tonight. Helena is going to ask me some questions tonight. I have a book coming out on Tuesday, and I'm very excited about it. So I'll let you ask me all about it.
Well, what is the name of your book coming out on Tuesday?
It is called The Art of Myrrhbearing.
The Art of Myrrhbearing. And
Yes.
What inspired you to write this book?
Well, the Myrrhbearing women. The book is about the Myrrhbearing women, which Helena and I were actually just talking about the Myrrhbearing women, obviously, before the show, as we're like, what are we going to say tonight on this show? We were talking about how if you say the Myrrhbearing women to someone who's not Orthodox but is Christian, people who are very, very Bible literate and who know all about, how the women went to the tomb and found Christ was gone and the angel told, right? They find the empty tomb. They think of that as the episode of The Empty Tomb, and they don't think of them as myrrh-bearing women specifically. Like, they always kind of look at me in surprise and go, myrrh-bearing women? Which are the myrrh-bearing women? And we're thinking about, it's funny because in the Orthodox world, they're the myrrh-bearing women. It's Myrrh-bearer Sunday next week, right? so the book is timed to come out on right before Myrrh-bearer Sunday.
Well, it's great timing. That's
Yes.
wonderful timing. I, grew up in the Orthodox Church, as you know, as my mother, as you might know. And we were just talking about how we may have discovered what myrrh-bearing women were at the same time, because at our church on Holy Friday at the Lamentation service, all the little girls will dress in white and will circle around Christ's tomb and lay flowers, which is a beautiful service and is a great introduction in getting young women interested in what's happening in the church right now. Because, if I was just watching, I don't know that I would have known as much as I do now and known the service as well as I do now that I've participated in it. But what are your thoughts on that, watching that and getting to know that service through the myrrh-bearers?
Well, it's so beautiful. So I started in a Serbian Orthodox church. And then when you were born, we were in an OCA church, right, in Plano. And we did not have myrrh-bearers in those churches. I had never seen it before. It's a Greek tradition. And even so, I don't think it's universal among Greek churches. Mm-hmm. I know one Holy Friday, we were sitting there getting all the girls ready. And this lady was visiting from maybe Athens. And she was like, they don't do this in Greece. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was like, I don't think it started in Greece. And I was like, no, I heard it started in Houston. She's like, what? Like Houston, Texas. And so she found it very bizarre that we would have a tradition that started in America. But I was like, we're American people. And so we're going to develop some of our own twists on things, so long as they're in keeping with the spirit of things, I think that's okay. But it is very beautiful. For those of you who are not in Greek churches, we get all these little girls, elementary school girls. They're all dressed in white, and all pure white, and they'll have a little white basket full of rose petals. And during the lamentation, there are some lines about, what do the lines say?
Oh, don't put me on the spot.
We were just doing this
last week. Oh my gosh, we were just reading it. The big one is there's women to anoint him, and then there's something there, and the second one is women bringing spices.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Right? It's about the women coming to anoint him with myrrh and spices. I thought for sure we would know that.
I know, in my heart.
We watched for it all night, and then it came, and we were so excited. But the girls are so beautiful, right? So you've got the tomb, which is all decorated. And in our parish, we have the kids help decorate the tomb. The ladies, the older women will be actually wrapping flowers and stuff and getting them ready so that they look good. And they've made a plan, and they sort of instruct the kids, and the kids stick them all in. And it looks very nice. And then that night, you get these girls coming around and So they have like the little basket of rose petals, and it's their job, kind of like flower girls. They have to take the petals out of the basket and sprinkle them into the tomb, like they're, anointing Christ, or they're bringing this beauty to Christ's tomb. And actually, there have been a bunch of hilarious stories because the little girls are just, they're little girls, and they're not more mature just because they're in front of 500 people.
It does not stop them from sometimes doing whatever they want to do. This year, we had a bit of a mishap where I was trying to call them back, and they just refused to leave. They just loved being up there, and I think they got really nervous to be like the one to be the one that starts walking away. And they were really little. This was like 6 to 8 year olds. So they didn't leave for a couple minutes out there. I had to come and grab them.
It was really funny too, because Helena gives them the signal to come back, right? And so she's like down there and she's giving them the signal, and a couple of the girls noticed and they left.
But half of them came.
There are like 5 girls still going around the tomb after the other girls have left. And they're not concerned at all that the other girls have left. No. They don't mind. And then Helena goes and she takes one of the girls by the hand and pulls her away. And we just assume that the other girls are going to follow. No, it was awesome.
They did not follow. My life did flash before my eyes. I was like, what happens if this is the whole service?
Right?
They don't leave, and I'm just...
What if they're just here forever?
I'm giving them a signal for the rest of the service.
That was awesome. The best one, though, is my youngest. When she would do it, she had all of the girls feel slighted that they don't have more petals. It's always, they just feel like they should have a lot of petals. And we're like, just put one petal at a time, you'll be fine. But they really want a lot of petals.
They get very excited. They love to get a big handful for the first 3, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I'm out of flowers. And it's starting way less.
It's a hard lesson in, how to pace yourself.
Yeah.
But so my youngest would go around, and she ran out of petals, and it was still going. So she just would reach over to the tomb and grab handfuls of petals and refill her basket and then keep going. And it was perfect.
It was great. It was wonderful.
Lovely. Made everybody laugh.
Yeah.
Brought joy to the crowd.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is our first experience of myrrh bearers. And I have a couple of good friends who their names are Joanna and Susanna. So when I was, their baptismal names are. And so when I first met them, we were talking, and they were like, oh, my baptismal name's Joanna, mine's Susanna. And I'm like, who are those? I feel like I don't know them. And they're like, oh, they're the myrrh-bearing women. And so they gave me the whole background on it. And then I went to the Holy Land with one of them, and we went to the Abbey of the Dormition, which is like a Catholic abbey in the place where Mary would have gone up to heaven.
Oh, wow.
And you go downstairs into kind of the basement area, and there is a chapel, and that is a chapel dedicated to the myrrh-bearing women. And there's an icon of each woman. It's a fairly modern, the whole church is modern. A lot of the Catholic stuff there feels pretty new. I don't know why exactly, but it's all very new and very modern, very pretty. But so they had all of the myrrh-bearing women with these very pretty mosaics, and we spent a lot of time in there just looking at them and thinking about them, and it was just lovely. So that sort of put the myrrh-bearing women on my radar, I would say.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. When I read the book in the first half, the first part, you talk about the myrrh-bearing women. You kind of go through them one by one, and you list out who they were and what we know about them. And I thought that was really interesting because it was nice to kind of see them all in one place. Because I feel like, I would read it and I would be like, I totally remember that story. I know you're talking about with Mary and Martha and with Mary Magdalene, all these people. And then I was like, oh my gosh, they're all the people who were there. So it's really cool to see it all in one place when you read the book. I really appreciated that.
It's true. It's really neat to think of them as a community. Mm-hmm. People are not always, it's not that we're not aware, we're not always cognizant of the idea that there were women traveling with Christ and the apostles the whole time. There are these women who come from Galilee and who travel with them, plus Mary and Martha from Bethany. Mm-hmm. And they're actually mostly people who've known Christ for years. A lot of them are related to him in one way or another. But we do know many of their names from the Gospels, and Holy Tradition preserves some details about their lives. And I thought that was kind of one of my favorite parts about this book, was I got to just go in and really research each of them and figure out who is this, and start mapping it out. Who are these people and how do they know each other? And they make a very beautiful little community.
Yeah. when I was reading that part, I really liked the parts where you point out, like, we were talking about this earlier with oh man, what's her name?
Salome.
Thank you, Salome. I keep forgetting. Her sons were the fishers of men, right? Where Jesus said, "Come with me, I'll make you fishers of men." And you point out in the book that they weren't necessarily leaving with someone they had just met. Like these people were all raised together, and Salome went with them. So it was less of like, the story that I had always pictured it as, like, these people just decided to give up everything after meeting Jesus for the first time. But this is their family friends when they grew up with someone they know. And you brought that up a couple times in that section of, like, well, this woman, like, knew Jesus, watched him grow up, which just reminded me of the people in my church who helped me out and were the Myrrhbearing women of my church who helped raise me and helped us out when there were hard times. So there's a couple women like that, like Amity and Whitney and Ellen and Carol.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's a beautiful thing when you're lucky enough to grow up in one parish. And for most of your life, right? You were like 3 when we got there, right? But to grow up in that community, I have very good friends in the parish who are like parents to you guys. They're like all honorary godmothers or something, right? And it feels like an extended family, and it is very beautiful. It's like you get some bonus aunts and uncles who will watch over you. And actually, it's funny, Amity and Whitney, you mentioned, that's Joanna and Susanna. And I think of them as myrrh-bearers. I really do. And not just because they're saints or myrrh-bearers, but because as I started looking into it and understanding what a myrrh-bearing woman is, I was thinking about them. I always think of this one moment with Amity, whose patron saint is Susanna. It was like a Wednesday, and there was going to be a pre-sanctified liturgy. And it was afternoon, maybe lunchtime, and she's like putting soup on the stove at church. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm starting a lentil soup for the pre-sanctified tonight." And I was like, "Oh, are you going to be here?" And she goes, "No, I can't make it." And I was like, "So you're just putting on soup for everybody for later, huh?" And like, nobody will necessarily know that she's the one. She's not going to look for credit for it, right? Or she's just one of those people who she'll be watching during coffee hour and we're running low on cups maybe. And she will quietly go in back, grab cups, bring them out. She's not assigned that task. It's not her job. But she wants to make sure, kind of like the Theotokos at the wedding at Cana.
I was just about to say, that's what it reminded me. She was watching, and she knew more. You wrote in the book, I think, she was maybe more watchful than the people who were getting married, because she noticed that the wine was running low, and she noticed that, and she told Jesus to step in, and she told the servants to do whatever he says. And
right. Yeah, there's a steward there. So it's his job to make sure that the wine doesn't run out. And he's not even noticing it. He doesn't even realize what's going on. But Mary notices. Yeah. And Amity notices. And there are people like that. I think especially women like that. But there are people of both genders, I'm sure, like this, who are just paying attention to what's going on. And they're not looking for recognition. They're just looking to make sure everybody's okay. And I love the story of the wedding at Cana. It blows me away because Christ's first miracle, he's going to heal all these people. He's going to raise people from the dead. He's going to cast out demons. He's going to feed 5,000 people with just a couple loaves. But his first miracle is like, oh, it's a wedding and they're going to run out of wine. And so not only does he make wine, but he makes it the best wine anybody's ever had. And it's like, what a lovely thing, right? Like his mother is so concerned to preserve the joy of this couple and to preserve the beauty of this wedding. And it's not life or death at all, but it matters. Like our happiness matters. I think about that at summer camp, where Helena and I have worked in summer camps together, and she's a camp genius. Helena is. She's like, she can make up camp games like that, and they're all fun. She's awesome. But camp is like that, because I feel like it's sort of a message to the kids from the church. We care if you are happy. Yeah. Like it matters that you have a joyful experience. We're going to go out of our way to put something together that you're just going to find outrageously fun. And that's a message, as the Orthodox Church, we're so like the incense. It's so somber. It's so beautiful, but it's also real serious, right? And so to have these moments where it's just really clear to everybody, your joy really matters.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
That's
it's
lovely.
so nice.
Another thing if I remember correctly, that I loved about that story is Jesus tells her, like, it's not my time. I'm not going to do that. And she's like, no, you are going to do that. You never see anybody boss Jesus around like they try to. And he's like, okay, sure. But Jesus will listen to his mother. That's
true.
really wonderful. And it also kind of goes to show another thing you touched on in the book is that some of these women like aren't necessarily like these like quiet, like they'll tell you to do things. Some of them are direct, like you talked about Mother Maria of Paris, who was a tough woman. Like, and she what I really liked about her story that you wrote in that part 3 of the book was oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Okay, I'm remembering. Sorry. Okay, you said, I think her father died and she became an atheist when she was really young. Yeah. And then later, she was just kind of still confused and still unhappy with the world around her. Saw a lot of talk and not a lot of action from these people, and she wasn't afraid to say it. And then I think she experienced more grief, or her friends lost some kids, or she lost
a
child. And then the grief kind of brought her back to the church.
Yeah. And
I thought that was a really beautiful thing. It's also very telling of God's plan for everyone, is that, grief took her away, and she took her time there, and she experienced life without, being a Christian. And then grief was what brought her back.
It is an interesting idea, because grief is such a huge, profound experience. And in a way, it almost feels like it either pulls you away from God or it pushes you close to God.
Yeah.
And sometimes it pulls us away because we blame God, or we feel like, she was young but I mean, some adults feel this way too, where it's like, I've been a good person, I've done all the right things, and yet you didn't spare us this tragedy. Maybe you're not real. Maybe you don't care. Maybe if you are real, I don't want to believe in you because of it, right? I mean, that's where people go with it. And then at the same time, there can also be that moment where grief can kind of empty you out. And then when you call out to God and he answers, like, you're actually quiet enough and humble enough to hear it. I speak from personal experience as a person who is not quiet. Like I chatter, I talk, I'm always thinking about something. I'm usually doing 2 or 3 things at a time. And so I'm always in motion, and it's hard for me to just be quiet and, be still and know that I am God. Mm-hmm. It's hard. And I think Mother Maria was kind of like that too. You see in her life that as she's, founding these monasteries and these homes for people who need refuge, she's always working. She hardly even slows down to go to church. She's like painting icons and building chapels, and she's going, and she's cooking and she's cleaning and she's taking care of people all the time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it takes something like that moment of grief to really settle people like that down. Yeah. And to quiet us so that we can hear God. And it's true, like her losing her daughter, she has these experiences with God that just transform her and change her life forever. Yeah. And it's really, it's beautiful. She's really a neat person overall. Like Mother Maria of Paris, she's a modern saint, and she's just really cool. So the book, it like starts with the Myrrhbearing women from the Gospels, or all from the Gospels. And then it gets in, then the second part goes through kind of where they appear in the Gospels, like what are the stories in the Gospels about them. And then also, I should say, it's not just the Myrrhbearing women. It is actually also Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, because they also brought myrrh. Right? What is myrrh, and what does it mean to bring myrrh, and who else brings myrrh? And so there's a thing in the book about the 10 virgins. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yes. So it's like these 10.
Ooh, yes. And in the book, I know what you're talking about.
So, but one of the reasons that I was so fascinated to write this book is because of the 10 virgins. And it's like 5 are foolish and 5 are wise. And the foolish ones have gone to sleep, and the wise ones are getting their oil lamps filled with oil because the bridegroom's coming, right? So this is like the basis for our bridegroom services. And I remember hearing this gospel one day, it just hit me wrong. And I was like, why are they not going to share their oil?
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Always
Like,
felt
it's
the same
interesting,
way.
right? But I mean, it's interesting because Christ is always telling us to share, right? There's always this idea that if you have a lot, you're supposed to be sharing it. And we have, the rich man in his barns. He's wrong. He should have shared. The rich man and Lazarus, he should have shared. And then you have these moments, though, where Christ is like, no, you shouldn't share. And with the young women there, they're not supposed to share. And I had to do some investigation and ask around a little bit. And eventually I got a very satisfying answer, because I have some priests, they're delightful, but they'll give you the, why do you think they can't share this? It's like, Father, do you not know the answer? But I asked someone, one of the priests, and he said, well, the fathers say that the oil in the lamp is actually the oil of virtue. And that this oil builds up in you when you do acts of mercy and compassion, when you're doing beautiful things and you love people and you really express it tangibly, an oil builds up. And it's that oil that is lit for the lamp. And the orthodoxy has the most beautiful imagery, and it just runs all the way through, right? So like in the Old Testament, Israel is meant to be the lamp to the nations. And they have the lighting of the lamp every night at the tabernacle, which becomes our Vespers, right? But this idea of the lamp, it's an oil lamp. And to be the lamp to the nations, you have to do like works of mercy and compassion, beautiful things that then become an oil that burns brightly and shines the light of God. And that for me was just a huge... light bulb moment.
Like,
it was like, oh, I see the light. Like, I get it. But it's so beautiful. And so, anyway, I bring this up because in the book, I sort of talk about this idea of what myrrh-bearing is in a larger way, not just coming to Christ's tomb with oil, but I sort of back away. I'm like, there's going to Christ's tomb with oil, and there's going to other tombs with oil. And then there's like, what about maybe going and taking care of somebody in general. And is that also myrrh-bearing in a way? And so I look at examples in the Bible and then also examples since the Bible.
Yeah.
And Mother Maria is one of my favorites.
That's a great one. Where did you first hear? Because I first heard about Mother Maria from you, I think. So where did you first hear about Mother Maria?
I want to say, I don't know where or why I was hearing about her, but one of the first things I knew about her was that Callistos Ware was saying, Bishop Callistos Ware of blessed memory, was saying that, so he's a genius, he's brilliant, he's written all these beautiful books, he's so wonderful. He went to Paris. I think he was pretty young because he was way younger than Maria, I believe. He was younger. I don't know how much younger. So he knows she exists. She's like this nun in Paris, well known for being this Russian lady who's really tough, right? We Orthodox, we have some tough women, and she's at the top of the list. So he's walking down the street, and he's near the place where she would be, and he sees her, and she's sitting at this cafe, and I don't want to get it wrong, but if I remember correctly, there's whiskey and a cigar involved. And she's like outside at a table with whiskey and a cigar. And he sees her and he thinks, oh, that's got to be her. And he turns around and walks the other way because he's terrified of her. And I totally get that. And I've known some really beautiful, and in particular, actually, I mean, there are some yayas who are terrifying, right? Like if you see the yogurt commercials with the yaya, there's like the Oikos ads where they've got the yaya who's always like mad at everybody. But especially, you'll get like the older babushkas, the Russian women or Ukrainian women or Serbian women. Like they can be super tough. I think about your great-grandmother. When I think of Mother Maria, I think of your great-grandmother.
Yeah, she was tough. She was tough.
She was tough. She was awesome. She lived to be 105. And she was, she's Helena's dad's grandmother. And she was born in Montenegro. And she was tough as nails. And and the stories are crazy, right? Like the stories from back then, it's like World War I. And she watches her brothers killed on the battlefield. She sees her father killed on the battlefield. Her sister dies in her arms. She's a prisoner of war building a road. Like there's just all this tragedy and this difficulty. And then when she's explaining how she met her husband, that's also crazy. Like remember her sister was married to an American. Yeah, her sister was married to a man whose friend went to America.
Yes.
And then he came back to find a wife. And Anja's like 17 years old in a small town, Bjeletich. And he is like 40. And he's been in South America, mining maybe.
Yeah.
Nobody's totally clear. Well, they always said South America, and everybody assumed they meant South America. And then we realized there were a lot of Serbs who came to Galveston. And we thought maybe he was just in the South. So we don't know. Because Montenegrins went to both places. So we don't know. But anyway, he was way older than her. And she's serving them at the table, and she kind of makes eye contact with him, and he looks at her. She goes back in the kitchen. And then the wife goes out. Her sister comes back in the kitchen, goes, he wants to marry you. And she's like, okay. And that's it. They get married.
That sounds like Bubba.
Had 4 kids. Eked out a really difficult life in the mines in Montana. But she was tough. Tell the fruit story.
The tree?
Do you remember the fruit? Yeah, the tree.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite one. I tell this to everyone. She's at they're in Montana, and there's all these like Serbs in Butte. And I think she's at like a house party, and there's this guy there, and he said something mean about her friend. And they're outside at this house party, and she uproots a small tree and chases him around the building with it. I love that story. It's so good. And then years later, when he dies, and they like can't trace him to anyone, and they say, you know, did you like his inheritance? You say you knew him, and she goes, no.
Well, she was a distant relative. It turns out he had no relatives in America. The guy was a jerk. He said nasty things about her friend, but he said a lot of stuff about a lot of women, and he was not a nice guy to women specifically. Yeah, and so she chased him with a tree one time. She chased him with a tree. And then she also, like when he passed away, he didn't have any relatives. And they were like, well, Anja, I think was like his 4th cousin or something. And she's like, ugh, yeah, you know, whatever. I wish I wasn't. And they were like, well, he had a lot of money and you can claim it because you're his only heir. And she's like, no, thank you. Just bury it with him. And she walked away. She's awesome. She's like Mother Maria.
That's a tough woman. That's
right?
A tough woman.
They're tough. They're Orthodox ladies. They're very tough. Yeah. But okay, we're going to take a very short break. And we will be right back with more talking to my daughter, Helena. See you soon.
Year after Pascha, the Orthodox Church celebrates the Holy Myrrhbearers, who cared for Jesus' body after he was crucified. But myrrh-bearing has a broader definition. It can serve as a metaphor for the practical, incarnate love to which Christ calls his followers. In The Art of Myrrhbearing, author Elissa Bjeletich Davis explores the lives of grace-filled, myrrh-bearing saints in Scripture and throughout the life of the Church, offering questions for reflection in each chapter. By following the lead of compassionate saints, such as Joseph of Arimathea and Olga of Alaska, we can learn to embrace a simple and profound way of life in ever-deepening communion with Christ and with others. You can find this book at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. I'm Elissa Bjeletich Davis, and my daughter Helena Bjeletich is back on the show tonight, a veteran of Everyday Orthodox. She joined us for our 200th episode. Whenever I need a co-host, I always grab Helena because she's so good at it. But I'm sure all of her siblings would also be excellent at it, and I love you all equally. But Helena's here, and some of you are not. But at any rate, Helena's on the show tonight because I have a book coming out on Tuesday called The Art of Myrrhbearing. And I was like, well, I can't just sit here and talk about it myself. But I did want to tell you guys about it because I'm excited about it. So Helena came on graciously to discuss it with me. But yeah. So do you have a question? What do you have for me?
Okay, well, in a couple stories, this is relevant to what you just said. There's some stories of some siblings, and in those stories, we see a little bit of some sibling rivalries. The first one, Mary and Martha, when I was reading through that one again, it reminded me, there's sometimes in the Bible where there's a story, and there's kind of like a good guy and a bad guy, and when I was little, I was like, I'm totally identified with the good guy, like the prodigal son returning, and now that I'm older, I'm like, sometimes I'm the bad guy, sometimes I'm the one who's a little jealous of the fatted calf. And Mary and Martha is one of those. Sometimes I'm the sibling that's like, oh my gosh, she's not helping. I think if I was in the same situation.
Oh, now that you mention it, you know what? You are very Mary because you are very, you would sit at Christ's feet. But now that you mention it, oh my goodness. Yeah, you got some Martha because you're always putting things together, right? Yeah. Like if there's going to be like a Mother's Day, Helena has finally been cured of this, and you'll prove it next month. Yeah, I hope. But Helena would she would like try to organize all the siblings. There are 5 of them, plus now 2 step siblings. She would try to organize everybody into a Mother's Day gift, and it was like not everybody was into it, right? Not everybody, they're like, I love Mom, I'll do something, whatever, don't worry about it, I'll call her. And Helena is like going over, like to the point where she's damaging her relationship with her siblings because it's so important that everybody get involved and do this thing. And so, yeah, I could definitely see that. But.
Yeah. So when I read that one, I was thinking about that. But then you go into about, myrrh-bearing and service and how, obviously neither of them are in the wrong necessarily because Martha, is preparing for the whole group, but Mary's not wrong either for being at Jesus' feet because that's Jesus. When you wrote about it as myrrh-bearing women, you write a lot about like acts of service and things like that. So I guess want to hear a little bit more about what do you think about being trying to be a myrrh-bearer in your own life and doing acts of service for other people.
Well, I think that's always a classic story. I think especially for women. Because generally speaking, we are trying to take care of people. And so we're trying to like make dinner and help you with your homework. And, in general, even if the mom has a full-time job, they say women always have the mental load, right? Like women in general, not always, but women tend to carry the mental load so that my kids will call me. I'll be working. I have a job, or I'll be doing something else. Maybe I'll go on vacation, and I will get calls about like, Mom, do we have ketchup? I'm like, what? Like, you're there. I'm not there. Do we have ketchup? I'm like, I don't know. But you know what? I know. Second door on the left in the pantry. There's some ketchup right there. And there's also should be some in the fridge, but there's only about that much left. Because I know that because I carry the mental load. And so a lot of times we can get so burdened with it that we feel like we don't have time for a spiritual life. Mm-hmm. And so on the one hand, it's really important to like empty ourselves out and to be self-sacrificing. On the other hand, it's important to spend some time at Christ's feet. And, like Holy Week, right? Like you have to just spend some time in the church. And some years you can't. So the years you can, some years somebody's in the hospital or, I was just talking to someone yesterday who had COVID all week and couldn't go to church. It's like, Elissa, a friend of ours, missed the entire thing, Holy Week and Pascha also because of the flu. Yeah. So those years when you can go, like you have to go and you have to set everything to the side and be there like Mary at Christ's feet. Mm-hmm. So we look at it a lot of times as a balance. But then I really enjoy Mother Maria, we were just talking about, because she's like, no, my worship is my work. Yeah. Which, you risk burnout if you're too serious about that. But there is a certain part of that where it's like, this is not this life that we have and these people that we take care of, whoever they are, whether it's your parents or your kids or your siblings or whatever it is, right? Like maybe you're a nurse, maybe you're a doctor. If there are people that God's going to put on your path that you're supposed to take care of. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing that, that if you can do it as a joyful offering to God, then it is worship. It is a blessing, and it is a spiritual act that's going to build up all this oil in your heart. You shine with the light of Christ, right? But there's also a way to do it and grumble and hate it and not have that effect at all. Although, to be fair, even the holiest people grumble sometimes. And I'll say Mother Maria, great example, because she does seem like she could have been grouchy sometimes.
Well, I can't remember which saint it was, but there was a woman you talked about in part 3 about that, you asked in one of your like reflection questions. Every little chapter of the book has some questions for reflection on it afterwards, which is really a wonderful thing to add, and it kind of feels like it's a bit of a habit you picked up from all the
all the children's stuff
I do. But I still liked it. I was from all the Sunday school, all the what's the name of the Christmas
She
one?
doesn't remember my book.
I was the
she has no idea.
Pig of the book.
She's like, what's the book called? It's called Welcoming the Christ Child.
Welcoming the Christ Child.
And Tending the Garden of Our Hearts does the same thing. There are questions. So for children's books, though, we'll do like 2 comprehension questions and then kind of a discussion prompt. Mm-hmm. But this is different. And it's actually something that Ancient Faith does with a lot of their books, and that in general, I think Christian publishers are doing a lot, because it facilitates group stuff. Like, so if you have like a book group and you want to read this book or others, there will be like questions at the end of the chapter so that the group leaders aren't the ones trying to think of it, because the author kind of knows where you should be going with it, right? Yeah. But so it's good for like a journaling prompt or something.
Yeah,
but what was the question
that struck you? Was you had asked about, it might have been St. Olga of Alaska or Mother Gavrilia. Yes. Okay. Cool. I can only think of my cousin Gavrilo.
Gavrilo. Yeah, that's right. Hi, Gabe.
Hi, Gabe. Shout out. Anyway, you had asked, when does service, an act of service that fills you up versus something that just empties you? Which is something we've talked a lot about, doing things like yes trips and things like that. So that really resonated with me of like what kind of service will fill up your lamp but also fill you up and not exhaust you, and fill you with the love of Christ, and what might be a little more exhausting and a little less sustainable to do. Yeah.
I think we have to pay attention to that, right? Because if there are certain things, and it sort of depends on your personality, and it depends on, I don't know, like the week, right? Like some tasks can be so joy-filled and so energizing, and then the next time you do them, it's not the same, and you're not sure what the difference is, but it's different.
Yeah.
But I do think, the more we're able to be cheerful about an offering, the better it goes.
Yeah.
And I think of St. Paisios, he would talk about how when you're kind of cooperative-minded with God, life is pretty easy, and when you start fighting him, it gets hard. And you know where I got that from? I Will to You Will. Oh. Best children's book ever. I can't get half an hour into a conversation without talking about that book. But there's a book called From I Will to You Will. I did not write it. It's excellent.
It's very good.
It's kind of hard to find, but they did finally do a second printing. It's a Greek book, but it's in English. It's so good. And it's the teachings of St. Paisios, but told like as an allegory for kids. And one of the things that he talks a lot about in there, that the character, St. Paisios, is he's talking about how, like, when your thoughts are frustrated and angry, the path is really rocky. And when your thoughts are positive and cheerful, the path is really smooth. And I think that's the same thing with serving as well, right? Like on yes trips, what do? We're like, yes is Youth Equipped to Serve. Go online, Youth Equipped to Serve at Focus North America. It's yesnorthamerica.org. Give gifts. You guys, regular listeners know I'm always plugging yes.
It's a wonderful program.
I love yes. Helena is living proof of how great yes trips were.
Really great. Really great.
We had great times. And that's one of the really beautiful things is you experience this service, but it's filling you up. And it's like kind of filling you with the Holy Spirit. Like you feel like something holy is transpiring between you and these people you're meeting on the street. And part of that is that at the beginning, we're reminding everyone to put aside their expectations and to put themselves aside. Like no I statements. Don't say, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm frustrated. I'm just for today. Let's not think about how we're feeling and just like go through and go with the flow. And so it's a very it's a good way to be, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you do have to monitor yourself. You just don't have to complain about it,
Yeah.
but you have to monitor yourself and be aware that if it's wearing you out, like if you're introverted and going on yes trips exhausts you, then you can't be doing that all the time, right? You can do it sometimes, but you have to plan ahead, right? Or if a lot of us struggle with that, where a lot of activity, a certain amount of it is great, and then you hit that point, and now it's too much.
You gotta go to bed.
Yeah, and so we have to give ourselves permission to build in breaks and rest, and sometimes that means relying on other people to help us. Yeah, which a lot of us don't like to do. Helena doesn't like to do that.
On the yes trip, another thing they talked about that I thought was pretty relevant in this book too was on the first day of the trip when we talk about those I statements, which again was really like the first time I heard that yes trip, I was like, oh my gosh, all day I'm thinking I'm hungry, I don't want to be here, I want to leave, this is boring. Like, oh my gosh. And then year 2 and 3, it was a lot easier and a lot more fun to just like, let go of it all and just be present, which can be really, really tough. But another thing we talked about was helping versus serving, just like using those two words. And I know in the book you say service a lot, and that kind of felt like
I never got yes. It's true. It's the fix, help, serve.
Yes.
And it's that sense that like if you're going to fix, so let's say you go into a situation. In this case, we're talking usually about being with homeless people, right? If you come in with an attitude like, I'm going to fix this problem, it implies that you know what the solution is and you have some tools and you're just going to come in and you're going to fix it for them because they couldn't fix it themselves.
You're already placing yourself as like, well, I know more. I'm because of my situation versus theirs, I'm already like better than them in a way.
Right, exactly. You don't walk in as an equal at all or even lower. You walk in like at the top and you're going to bow down and do that. And help, the word help someone is the same kind of thing. Like it's like they're on the ground and you're going to put your hand out and pull them up, which is nice if they are on the ground, but really it implies a power differential, and it means that you're thinking of yourself in a certain way. And, there's a way that, and you'll see youth groups go out to do service projects and it'll be like, we're going to bring Jesus to the streets. And it's like, guess what? He's there. They're praying all the time because they're relying on him more than you are. And so, you've got it easy. You're like on TikTok all day, what do you know about Jesus? Even though you may be watching Christian videos or something, but come on. But no, it is. So the service is the idea more like a server, like in a restaurant, like how can I help you? Yeah. Right? Like your server doesn't decide what you're going to have for dinner and then bring it to you and tell you better eat it, right? Your server asks you, what is it that you want?
Meet them where they are and just be with them was a big thing I loved about the yes trip. And a big thing I noticed in the book as well is a lot of these people, they would just go and they would meet everyone where they are. They would open their homes. A lot of these people would. And another one story I really love, and a saying I've always really loved, is St. John Maximovich. And we've been to visit him in San Francisco, yes. Quite a few times. So tell us about that in your book, and what do you think makes St. John Maximovich a myrrh-bearer?
So with both St. John and St. Maria, I wrote these chapters that were like books themselves. And my editor's like, wow, some of these chapters are like, average chapters like 1,000 words, 2,000 words. These are like 5,000. She's like, you're going to have to cut these down. And it was so hard because he's got such a fascinating life. And so the more I'm looking at him, the more interested I got because I started like really reading in detail. I knew about him, but I was really researching in detail. And I even developed a theory that your great uncle may have been married by him, which would be very exciting. Or maybe St. Nikolai Velimirovich.
Whoa.
Because they were both at the same time at Church in London, and there still is. And your great uncle Dan got married at that church during World War I. And I got a copy of the register, and it doesn't say who the priest was, but I think he was married by a saint. Which is cool because I think he's a saint too. Yeah. So, sorry, St. John, he's beautiful, right? He's this, again, another Russian. Like not everybody in the book is Russian, but he and Maria are Russian. And Russians do tend to be like a little grouchier, I would say, like a little, maybe less. I feel like I would have a hard time approaching him. He actually kind of looks like a dwarf from Lord of the Rings. Like the one in the
Gimli?
Yeah, he's like Gimli.
Love Gimli.
He looks a little bit like Gimli. But actually, I recently saw some footage of him that's like a black and white video. And it seems like in person more, he was really warm and his eyes were really sparkly. I feel like a lot of the pictures of him, he always looks kind of angry.
Yeah.
But not. I don't think he really was all the time.
Good.
But one of the things that I really love about, so he was an emigre from Russia. His family was part of the Duma, which was the government under the Tsar. So they were like the parliament, basically. And so his family had to flee immediately with the Bolshevik Revolution, or they would have died. So they went to Serbia, they went to Paris, they moved to London. They're moving around. He becomes a Serbian priest. He was a priest with the Serbs, but it was, I think, in general in the Russian Orthodox Church. I'm not sure.
I think so.
But he started out with the Serbs because he spent some years in Serbia and went to seminary there. But he becomes a bishop, and he's got this community of people that he's taking care of in Shanghai and then in the Philippines. And there are all these beautiful stories about it, but he's just taking care of them. You know, he's like watching for storms, and he's walking the perimeter and praying to protect the island. And it's just this very beautiful way that he shepherded them around until he could find them a place to be. And during the years in China, they had, there are a lot of Asian babies with cleft lip and palate, which is a very specific birth defect that we are very familiar with in our family. We know a lot about it. But St. John would go out at night and he would listen for the cries of babies, and he would find them because they would be abandoned on the street. If they had like, not always, right, but often a child with a significant birth defect would be literally just abandoned on the street to die in the cold night air. And so he would go pick up these babies and come back sometimes with 2 babies in his arms from a walk at night. He hardly slept. And so he took care of these babies, and he would bring them and give them to the nuns, and the nuns would be taking care of a bunch of babies. And then they started an orphanage back in San Francisco, and he would be sending the babies back. And it's just such a beautiful image of him, you know, to be this caretaker and this, in some ways, he's like Gimli, right? Like he's this kind of grouchy looking Russian guy, but he's going out there and he's finding these babies and he's picking them up and carrying them and taking care of them. And, you know, I think of him as really a great caretaker.
Yeah.
And he'd stay up all night reading letters from people. His spiritual children would write to him, and then he would always answer. And so they say if you write to him now, he always answers. And one of your siblings, my oldest, your oldest sibling, I guess, both of our oldest, whatever, wrote some letters one time to St. John. And I was going to San Francisco. And so they were like, oh, you know, could you put those, deliver them? Because there's actually a slot. I don't know if people realize this or not. Even if you've been there. I actually had been there a couple times before I found out about this. There's a slot in the box where his relics are. So it's like a glass box so you can see him because he's incorrupt. But when you go into this, there's a slot underneath and you can put your letters in. And people say that they still receive answers from him. And apparently there was a woman at that parish who was really annoyed because she was like, why are people putting letters in there? You know, he's passed on, leave him alone. Vladika's gone. He's not going to answer your dumb letters. Stop it. And then he came to her in a dream and was like, I answer every letter. So she's like, sorry, let's put a mail slot. You know, but so yeah, one of my kids wrote some letters. And I was like, yeah, it was the weirdest thing. I was in the church. I handed in your letters. I venerated. Krish Grudikon was there. We venerated that. I was there with my friends, Amity and Whitney again. And we're just standing there. And all of a sudden, out of the altar bursts a priest. And he's like, where are the women from Texas? And we're like, what? We're here, you know. And he's like, I just want to talk to you about, you know, why we're not all one jurisdiction in America. And I'm like, okay. Thank you, Father. All right. And we leave. And I'm like, what was that? And we're like, I don't know. I have no idea why he wanted to tell us that. And so I get home and I'm telling that story. And sure enough, in the letters, there were all these lamentations about why we weren't just one Orthodox church in America. And like they didn't go get the letter out from the thing.
Yeah.
So he was in the altar praying, and I guess St. John came and told him, like, I've got a message for the ladies from Texas. And there you go.
That is really neat. That's
he's
really
a neat
cool.
priest.
I didn't know that story, actually. That's really
Really? You just don't remember because you were
probably
little.
don't remember, yeah.
You were so little.
But one of the stories I loved in your book was someone was coming with him one night, and he had 2 bottles of alcohol. And I don't remember who was with him, but they were like, "Why are you bringing
Just
that?"
kind of scandalized, right?
Yeah,
like,
a priest with some alcohol.
Because people were always telling him to stop walking the streets at night. And he's walking in the most dangerous neighborhoods, right? Like, he's never walking in the nice part of town.
No.
And they're like, you have to stop doing this. You're going to get mugged. You're going to get killed. Yeah. And he's like, it's fine. It's fine. And she's like, well, then I'm going to come with you. And he goes, fine, bring 2 bottles of vodka. And she's like, what? And he goes, get 2 bottles. So she brings 2 bottles. And then as
they're walking, they see a baby, right? They
hear it crying. It's in the dumpster.
In the dumpster. That's what I thought. Sad. But there's a man there, and he's St. John moves to get the baby, and the man is like, no, like, you can't do that. And then he grabs one of the bottles and he kind of offers it as a trade for the baby, which is a terrifying trade, really a terrifying trade to make, but he makes it, and then he saves the baby. I just thought it was a really great story, and he's a really great saint. We've known him, talked about him a lot in our family. So
yeah, he's really neat. He's a neat saint. We have so many. We have such a rich history of really beautiful saints. On the one hand, you think, oh, it would have been nice to live at the time of Christ, to have known him. Also would have been really, really hard, and most of them were martyred, of course. But as we get further and further away, we also have this just inheritance of all of these saints who have so much to teach us and so much to offer us. And it's just, it's so beautiful. It's very beautiful.
So a couple of these saints I recognize, and from our family, learning and talking about these, we visited St. John Maximo, which is relics before. Is there a saint in this book that you feel like you maybe just learned about or is pretty new to you?
There were some new ones because people would request them and they'd be like, why is this saint not in there? And I'm like, because I don't know who that is. So I had to go look them up. John the Merciful is one. I did not know about him. My friend Christina Wenger suggested, maybe Christina or her husband Tim, I was talking to them and I was showing them the book, and they were like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this one. And so they, I think, suggested probably John the Merciful, Cosmas and Damian, and probably Mother Gavrila as well. Mm-hmm. And they're all saints. Cosmas and Damian and Mother Gavrila, I knew somewhat, not as well as I know them now, because I got to research them and really get into the nitty gritty of their lives. But John the Merciful, I didn't know at all. And he's so neat. He's really neat. He's a bishop. I don't even remember when. It's in the book. It's he is this bishop who just always gives. He's always giving to people, and he's always merciful to people, and he's such a beautiful example. And what a joy to get to know him. He reminds me of Bishop Basil Rodzianko, he's also in the book, and he's one of my favorites. And my source on Bishop Basil Rodzianko is an episode of Everyday Orthodox, because I interviewed his assistant, his secretary, Marilyn Sweezy. And she's really cool. Marilyn's the greatest. And she came on the show and told us all about Bishop Basil. So the book is full of quotes from that interview with Marilyn.
That's really cool.
He's really neat too. Yeah, there are a lot of really great saints in the book, and a lot. So again, the first part is all about the myrrh-bearing women in the Bible and going through their life story. And then I kind of dive into the stories that we know about them, right? Because the first part is kind of who are they? Mm. And then the second part is, well, where do they appear in the Gospels and what's happening there? Mm-hmm. And what can we gather from those things specifically about myrrh-bearing, about how we're taking care of one another and how we interact with one another in the world, and why that matters to our salvation. Mm-hmm. So the second part goes through those Bible stories essentially. And then the third part is just some of my favorite saints, my new favorites and my old favorites all mixed in together.
Some classics and some new ones.
That's right. That's right. But you never know. Classics to us could be totally new to somebody else.
True.
Because it depends too. If you're in the Serbian church or the Russian church or the Greek church, different saints, right? So Luckily I've moved around a bit, so I've got some of all of them. I'm looking. I've got OCA, I've got Russian, I've got Greek. We've got a good
a nice
good
spread
mix,
here.
a good mix, and some Old Testament, right? Because I threw in Tobit.
Yeah. That was an interesting one, Tobit. I'd never heard of that. And you said it was your favorite book in the Bible.
Well, my favorite book, maybe Old Testament.
Old Testament.
Yeah.
You said you really liked it.
Yeah, I do really like it. I mean, it's hard to, there's the Gospel of John, you got it into the Bible. But you know what? The Bible's got lots of different genres, right? Like there's poetry in the Bible, in the Psalms. There's the Song of Solomon is totally different from the rest, right? There's like historical writing. There's, prophetic writing. There are the Gospels. They're all different. There are letters. There are epistles. So there are a lot of different genres in the Bible, and one of those genres is kind of a folk tale. And it's and Tobit is really beautiful because Tobit's a myrrh-bearer. Like really, he's if you haven't read Tobit, I don't want to spoil anything. Go get your Bible and read it. It's very good, but it's very short too. It's like 4 chapters. I mean, it's really easy to read. But Tobit is particularly known for the fact that he's in Babylon during the captivity in Babylon. And they would, just treat the Jewish people terribly, right? And so they're throwing these Israelite boys, they're killing the boys and then just throwing them over the city wall to be devoured by wild animals. Like they're not getting a proper burial, which of course in the Jewish tradition is super important, but is important, I think, to everyone. Yeah. I think all of us want to know that our loved ones had a proper burial, which is a thing that I'm thinking about in this book, right? Like why are we interested in that? And what does that mean?
Right.
But Tobit would go out at night in defiance of the police and the soldiers and everybody, and he would go get these bodies and he would bury them. And so he would always make sure that everybody had a proper burial. Yeah. And in the story, they're sitting down to this like great feast, and he hears that a boy was killed, and he stands up and he goes outside and he misses the feast, right? He misses meals all the time. He walks away from the family table. And he goes and he buries another body. And he's just this beautiful, patient, sweet man. And then the rest of the book's about his son. But Tobit, I'm really struck by that and by what a humble and beautiful kind of service that was.
Yeah.
It was neat. And especially because a lot of the other Israelites, Tobit was rare because he really stayed a faithful Jew. And a lot of them, they've been removed from Israel. They're kind of assimilated into this other culture. There are all these other things going on. A lot of them were not following the law. They weren't eating kosher. They weren't doing all the things that they were supposed to be doing. But he didn't judge them for that. And I thought that's really neat because I think, even here in the Orthodox Church, right? Like we all know somebody who isn't coming to church and isn't doing what they're supposed to do, and they're off doing some other crazy thing. And maybe we'll see them at Pascha one year and we'll be so happy to see them. And it's our job to be welcoming, and it's our job to love them. And Tobit is just right there serving them, even if they're not as nice as he is. They're not as good and righteous as he is. So I think he's neat.
Yeah.
I love Tobit.
Yeah.
The book is full of people like that. It's like a place to come get to know some new people.
Yeah.
It really definitely is. And to think about those relationships and what that means. I know you were talking about how you just felt like you kept seeing so much community in the book, because it's really about that mercy and the compassion and those acts that connect us together. Yeah. And so, it's, I'm really happy about it. I'm really, usually I'm like, but no, this book, I'm like, this is cool. I like this. Yeah. I like this a lot because I like the people in it.
It's really great, and especially that first part that you can really see the community form of the New Testament, and it's really a neat book. It's coming out on Tuesday. It's called The Art of Myrrhbearing.
Yes, and it's going to be available at the Ancient Faith store Amazon, all the places, all the usual places for your Orthodox books. But it's not there right now. So if you go there, apparently it may be on Kindle already if you're an e-booker. But you like Kindle.
Yes.
I'm not an ebook person at all. Happily wait to order on Tuesday myself. But it'll be there Tuesday, and I'm excited about it. If you're looking for information on it, or if you want a link to order once Tuesday arrives, obviously you go to the store.ancientfaith.com. But if you go to my website, which is my name, which is funny because it's like the hardest thing to spell in the world.
Oh, it's just my name. ElissaBjeletichDavis.com. You'll find all kinds of information there, and also on book club stuff in case you have a book club that wants to read it sometime. But yes.
Helena, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I had so much fun.
This has been a blast. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And we will see you next Sunday night to meet another Everyday Orthodox Christian. Good night.
Good night.